Okay, so my name is Eileen OLeary and I come from University College Cork, and earlier there was somebody speaking and they said that they felt out of place here because it had technologists and academics, and I'm looking around the place to see how many or which number of people are academics, because everyone I've seemed to encounter is technology, so bear with me. I say you're going to be bored stiff with the why we're doing everything rather than the how. I'm stuck between the two camps, why we're doing it, how we're doing it as a mix. These are my colleagues that worked on this project with me, but they weren't able to travel, so I'm going to speak on behalf of everybody. So I'm going to just start off by, I suppose, this picture to show where we started with this. I was and probably still am fairly on my own, looking down a long windy road. What are we going to do and why? And I have, if it'll open, here we go.
The Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland is a pharmacy regulatory body in Ireland, and a little like Martin Luther King, in 2013 decided, I have a dream. In the process of setting standards for pharmacy education and training, the PSI identified 178 behaviours. The head of the School of Pharmacy in UCC, waving a magic wand, indicated he wanted a way of recording and assessing these behaviours in a progressive fashion over the whole of the 5-year integrated in-farm. Initial reactions were enthusiastic but anxious. How are we going to do it? Many questions arose: how, when, where and who should measure these behaviours. We attended a brainstorming event organised by the Office of the Vice President for Teaching and Learning in UCC and met colleagues from nursing and medicine with similar questions relating to better preparing our graduates for professional practice. Subsequently, we formed a group called EPREP, Electronic Preparation for Professional Practice. Our project received funding from the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education under the Transitions theme. This allowed us to conduct a pilot study using PebblePad, which has given us the opportunity to fulfill our goal by preparing our students for professional practice, ensuring they are working hard.
Okay, so before even started before I said it, but that was just to give you a background and to say where we started from and how this whole thing began. Okay, so to some degree, to summarise that, we have a challenge on our hands. There's 178 behaviours that the PSI now want assessed, documented and monitored across a range of subject areas, across a number of different types of teaching methods, so in the laboratory, whether it's in workshops, lectures, in community practice, in placement, etc. So they want it across all disciplines, across all years, and across each type of teaching session. So that's our challenge, and I suppose the opportunity came, as we said there, when the Teaching and Learning, our National Forum for Teaching and Learning, put out a call for people to improve their use of technology and to see if we could use it to aid transition. So the transition theme that we looked at was developing our students better for professional practice, and that's where the ePrep group came from. So ePrep, and we do have, the website is built at this stage, so it's www.eprep.ie, and it has input in there from medicine, nursing and pharmacy. So part of what we wanted to do with PebblePad, and it's one of our first goals here, is we wanted a virtual platform to facilitate interprofessional learning. The second aim we had, and this is based around the competencies, and this is probably what I'll focus on most today, is we wanted a platform that was going to record, monitor, assess and provide feedback on our students' behaviours across a range of subjects, areas, places, etc. And then finally, and this is something I suppose I didn't think about at the very start, but we wanted to be able to create and provide ready access to learning resources. And I was talking to John on the way to dinner last night, and he summed it up really well for me when he called it just in time rather than just in case learning. So when we're preparing our students for going out onto practice, we give them stuff that they might need and we throw stuff at them, and half of it hits here and bounces back, some of it gets absorbed. But with PebblePad we can put these little links in and give them this, what we would now call just in time learning. So they will hopefully focus on it a little bit better when it's needed rather than having it just in case. So they were our initial ideas, I suppose, are what we had to do. So then we wanted to see, in order to get it right and to choose the platform, because everyone will tell you there's 101 e-portfolios out there, which one do you choose? So we conducted some student focus groups to see what do they want, and no prizes for guessing that they wanted to have all the information in one place. They wanted the identify the knowledge gaps was basically that they wanted to know from us what we needed them to learn, and then if they ticked it off, that was that done, and what else they had to learn comes next. So that's the idea here. They wanted it to be operatable on a mobile device. They wanted an element of standardized standardised teaching and learning. So for example, when they go out on placement in particular, some placements are too busy, some placements are too quiet. So sometimes they don't have the opportunity to learn, and then sometimes, because it's too quiet and they don't encounter the situations, then they don't have opportunity to learn on other occasions because it's too busy and the tutor doesn't have time to interact with them. So can we provide them with resources that could facilitate that kind of in-between? So that's the sort of standardised idea. Then a greater emphasis on IPL. The students are aware that when they go out into the working world, they're going to work with doctors, and there's something about the medical profession that has an aura of confidence about it that we can't seem to instill in our pharmacy students. So when they encounter them, when they go out on practice, the medic is still in charge and the pharmacist is the subling, and then the nurse is kind of in between. So they wanted at an early stage to introduce interprofessional learning, so it grew with the students, and the medics became aware of what the students in pharmacy knew and nursing knew, and they kind of valued each other's professions rather than one thinking that they were superior to another. And then finally, I guess it's the whole idea of being on a mobile phone and the one-stop shop for information, that it was easily accessible and readily available. So when we started with this was like a wish list really. I was like, if we get half of this, we'll be doing well. Then we talked to our academic staff, and they wanted the same things, but on top of that they wanted to ensure obviously privacy and security of student information. They wanted to integrate with our VLE. We were working with Blackboard. They wanted a single sign-on facility so that the students didn't have more than one password to remember and have complaints. They wanted to track and assess competencies. They wanted free lifelong access. PebblePad is definitely the only one that offers that because we looked. Then pre-made and custom designed templates, and more so than that, they wanted them also so the students could be users and creators. So it was a complete mixed barrel. They wanted to be able to generate reports so that they could look at the students' ability across the whole year and across the range of years, and again to look at interprofessional learning, collaboration, even at an academic level, and they operate on a mobile device just to keep the students happy. So when we put all of these together, and again, if you do get a chance to look at our website at www.eprep.ie, you will see that we did have a long list of things for PebblePad, and what we have done is said if it can or can't meet that, and then why that is useful to us as educators. Now I think that is out of date and I need to go back and update it, because all of the new things that PebblePad are bringing online need to be incorporated, or I'm not doing it justice. But it definitely at that stage fulfilled our needs, so I'm thinking this can only be better. So basically from that funding we needed a technology, and we needed the technology to support our students and our staff, and we needed it for the students' perspective to be able to document and track their competencies, have a reflection diary that is not just a tick box exercise, and then a way of identifying their knowledge gaps and providing digital resources for them that could potentially fulfill those knowledge gaps if they hadn't an opportunity on placement to do that. The second thing is for the staff, they wanted it to be convenient to provide feedback. I mean, it's still time consuming if you have, and we have about 70 students, it's still time consuming to provide this feedback. But I did hear that there's a new feature coming on board that you can have comments pre-made and adapt them, so that's definitely a good feature as well. So they wanted to be able to facilitate the feedback and assessment, and then also for the staff themselves to be able to track their own CPD. So it definitely works out as a dual tool from that perspective. So then when we went, and I was laughing when I saw this diagram earlier because it's always been a bone of contention with me. I don't know if I told you, but I'm a chemist by nature. I have no technology expertise. No one ever taught me how to teach, so I have no fundamental pedagogical knowledge. I have no fundamental technological knowledge, but I can draw chemistry structures till the cows come home. That's an Irish phrase. That means that I can draw them forever. Okay. So at the same time, when I come across PebblePad, and that's why I probably fell in love with it initially, is I didn't really need an awful lot of technological knowledge. I could listen and I could get trained, and then I could complete these templates. And I could look fairly impressive after a very short time when I created these templates. The second thing is, I suppose, I have it written in here, that I felt that it supported teaching strategies. So rather than I having to come up with teaching strategies or ways of implementing them, there was kind of it's inherently embedded in the templates and the philosophy of thinking, the development of skills, the progression of skills, students looking back at what they had done before and building upon it. So it's inherent. The way that you can reflect, you can scaffold and guide learning, you can be creative and imaginative with your web folios, etc. You can record competence. You have both peer, like there's a big thing in relation to assessment. It's fine to say self-assessment. We have a lot of arguments about it in UCC. People say, oh sir, self-assessment, students are going to give themselves full marks, right? They can only do that if they if you're not going to peer assess them as well and make them aware that they're not entitled to those full marks. But the huge advantage about self-assessment is that it makes students aware of what they're being assessed on, and they can no longer hide from it and turn around and say, well, I didn't know I was going to be assessed on that, so I didn't know I need to know it. So it's giving them responsibility and ownership for their own learning. It allows for collaboration, and apparently is going to again. And then of course formative and summative assessment and interactive learning, like we talked about earlier. And then from the whole support and use of technology perspective, there's pre-made templates that you can just use off the shelf, and again you can make custom-made templates and you can adapt them. What I absolutely love is if you make a mistake, or if you forget something, or you get a bright idea from the student that you visited on the first placement, you can actually insert a page or a change, and that rolls out to all the templates. That adaptability is fantastic when you have students on placement. As we saw and talked about, I suppose, earlier this morning as well, was the ability to be creative in creating CVs and the student displaying themselves more holistically rather than that flat 2-page CV that has to sum them up and make them stand out from the crowd. So there's fierce potential in there. So I guess what did we end up doing? And we got advice from Debbie. Debbie has been helping me loads with this from PebblePad, and Debbie told me keep it small, don't do everything. And then we started and we tried to do everything. I should have taken Debbie's advice on board. But we do have workbooks for placements. I'm going to go through a few little nitty things and those that we learned along the way and what we included in them after a while. What I've put in here for the workbooks for behaviour assessment in the lab is, obviously I started off by telling you that I was a chemist, so I had to get chemistry into PebblePad in some form or another. But at the moment in UCC, even in our chemistry degree, we have no formal way of documenting skills that the chemist has. So whether they are able to, run a reaction, do a reflux, do a recrystallization, anything, we don't document it. Here that wouldn't be of great value to our students going forward, but what is the skills that they use in doing them. So can they weigh accurately? Do they pay attention to detail? Are they courteous in the lab? Are they prepared? Are they on time? So all of these skills are in that core competency framework, and they can be assessed in our chemistry lab just the same way as they can be assessed in any environment. And it's something else that I mentioned this morning. We asked our pharmacy tutors earlier this year, if we were to change what we teach and how we teach the students soft skills, what would we do? And the feedback that came from our pharmacists was, get them to have jobs elsewhere. Don't have them working just in a pharmacy. Get them a job in a pub, a shop, even on a building site, so that they learn those more rounded and holistic soft skills. So I think that with PebblePad you can show how that is all relevant. This probably doesn't make a lot of sense. It's called the CSAT. So like I was saying to you, the PSI have given us 178 behaviours that we have to measure students' ability against. I know, insane, but I hope they're not going to watch this. Anyway, a lot of behaviours that they have to measure against. And the CSAT is this core competency self-assessment tool. So basically what it is a list of those 178 behaviours, and the students have to score themselves between 1 and 4 against these behaviours. I know. The faces, I must take a photo to go home and say, yes, everyone agrees that this is nuts. But this core competency self-assessment framework we can now mimic on PebblePad, and it's great because we have, and the students can see in first year what they measure themselves as and how they did it, in second year what they measure themselves as. In fact, we get them to do it twice a year. If nothing else in the earlier days, it makes them familiar with a number of these 178 behaviours so that they sort of have a feeling for what's expected of them as professionals. The IIOP, that's another governing body in Ireland, and they have a CPD cycle, and we now mimic that cycle and the students fill in that cycle. Again, without PebblePad, we wouldn't be able to do that. They would be able to do it in a Word document, but keeping record of it, and in 5 years' time when the students are graduating, trying to hold and find that record again was going to be pretty difficult. So we were able to do that. The others we've done as well, but we won't have time to go through the detail in them. We have done some collaborative work on web folios and different modules, and we have a whole set of behaviours that go across the first year programme. So one of the things then, this is just, I went with screenshots. I was going to open the workbooks, but I was afraid maybe technology wouldn't work, so I went with the screenshots. Sorry that it's very, very hard to see, but it's just one of the pages in it, right? And one of the things we got in feedback last year, we put this manual on PebblePad, and students went to the work placement without reading the manual, without opening the manual, without any information, with PebblePad on their phone, perhaps, and I don't know if they even knew how to get at it. And actually, when I look back, I blame myself. I didn't tell them to open the manual. I didn't tell them to look at it. I didn't talk them through it. I thought they would, but they didn't, right? And likewise, the tutors didn't know the learning outcomes. So what we had to do because of that, and now we've embedded it in this module, in this manual as well, is we've created a little summary basically of the learning outcomes. And the value that the students have on feedback talked about with this is unreal. Like they have said, when they're in 5th year and someone asks them, what did you do in 1st year? Thank you. What did you do in 1st year? They don't know. Whereas now they'll have a summary of those learning outcomes and they'll know the stages of what they went through. So when they click on that, for example here, it'll just do, like for 3 seconds, show you an example of it, because this is just created on VideoScribe.
Placement as pharmacy student is a great opportunity to put what you've learned so far into practice. So let's go through the main learning outcomes for 1st year pharmacy placement. Firstly, we want you to become familiar with the profile and layout of the pharmacy and understand the reasons behind this layout. We want you to notice where each area of the pharmacy is located and how this layout affects things like the workflow, the security of the pharmacy, and the supervision of all that's happening in the pharmacy by the practice.
Oh, sorry, to find back my presentation. It's just an example, okay, of what we can embed in it and the outcomes, and it's there for the students. And you remember when they wanted that one-stop shop for information, now they have it. When they go back to this portfolio and they want to know their learning outcomes, rather than reading, and there are quite a lot of pages in this workbook, rather than reading it in detail, they have a link to the summary of those learning outcomes, okay? And also I can send that to the tutor pharmacist. So then, with each of those learning outcomes, we have to rely on the pharmacy that they've gone to. They won't be too busy to talk them through the dispensary layout. They won't be too quiet. Well, if they're too quiet, they'll get to walk through the dispensary layout, but they won't see somebody go into the dispensary to get the things, etc. So that's the next thing that we created. And again, just the very start of it. You're probably familiar.
Use this resource to learn more.
Okay.
There are certain requirements that the outside of the current premises must meet. Click on each of the stars to learn about the
Okay, sorry, patience. I just need patience. Basically, if they click on the stars. Okay, so basically I suppose what I'm trying to do is just give you an idea of the different types of multimedia that we can implement and use. I've opened the wrong one. That we can implement and use through PebblePad to direct the students. So then what they have there is a resource that they can use in conjunction with their experience, and it's the same, they can use it, they have another, this is one of the core competencies, they have to be able to show communication skills. We go through a little summary again of what good communication skills are, but we want them to show how they've used these in practice. So these are just different things that are embedded throughout the workbook, and that's what we now refer to as the just-in-time learning. And when they need it, whether it's after the placement, whether it's in 3 years' time, etc., they still have access to that. So then this is just, again, the screenshots aren't ideal by me, but it's just an example of the student self-assessment. So basically, throughout the document there has been identified a number of competencies that they have demonstrated by completing a specific activity, and then this sheet is at the back where the student says whether they have or haven't achieved it. We have one then for the tutor pharmacist as well to agree or disagree with this, and we have it set up in order whereby the student is first of all asked, so what's the first behaviour there? The student, for the student it says my appearance is professional and I behave in a professional manner, and they have to add evidence to support that. So it's up to them what they want to put in there, what professional means to them, and then the tutor just says student behaves in a professional manner, and they answer that, and it's repetitive down through the sheet. So you have it from the student's perspective and from the tutor's perspective in the workbook. So like I mentioned earlier, the things that I love the most, I love the duplicate button. You can press repeat and off you go. The ability to create customised workbooks and to be in charge of them, because I've had situations where I've gone to go to LTU, that's our learning technology unit, to do things for me, and they're busy and they're not always able to understand what I'm saying. So I'm in complete control of my own workbooks with PebblePad. The ability to amend the workbook, as I say, when it's rolled out, if I want to add to it I can, that's great. The variety of measurement scales, so whether you want to just give verbal feedback, if you want to call it an A3, if you want to measure it, you have a rating scale, etc. Everything is submitted to the one place. This was a real draw for the staff in particular. It's in Atlas. If they have to assess it, they go into the specific assignment and everything is there. The auto submit is great. It means that the students, once they have saved it once, can't say I didn't submit it, and it is again put into the right place. Collections, collections are very useful for the students, in particular when we're focusing on behaviours. If we want them to show how many times they hit a specific behaviour, they can create a collection out of this. They can add evidence to support their achievement. The students, I must say, struggle with what this whole add evidence means, but we've worked on that now. So they had 2 hills to climb. They had to learn how to use PebblePad, and they had to understand what reflection was. But I think someone else mentioned that earlier. It isn't natural to students to reflect, so that's part of our learning. And then we had different options with workbooks, etc. So my time is definitely nearly up, but the key reasons that we chose PebblePad that kind of echo what was asked of us in the very start is, first of all, to develop in-house bespoke templates that we're completely in charge of, to maintain and improve templates as we go, confidentiality and security of student information, the single sign-on and the integration with Blackboard, the fact that it migrates with them on graduation and they can use it from here forward. Very important, we found that it was very flexible. It allowed what we all look for in our students at an early stage, so autonomy of their own learning, and then the whole idea of just-in-time rather than just-in-case learning. And John, thanks for that just-in-case analogy that you gave me last night. That was very good and useful. And finally, for future readiness, and again, it's great because obviously I prepared this before I came here, but the number of times I've heard these phrases echoed in the different presentations since I've come here is amazing. The only thing that I regret is that I'm the only one person here, so when I go home I'm going to force everybody to watch the recording so that they too can see what's going on. So again, it's been said already, and it's literally a summary of all the different things that it does offer, and that is it. That's our user base. It's not huge, 70 students, and just the thank yous to the people who worked with me in PebblePad and you for your attention. Thank you. Finished. Questions?
Has anyone got any questions following before she takes a seat?
Did everyone understand me? It's like no problem.
What were the students like when you first gave it to them?
Okay.
Did they take to it quickly?
No. Do you see, it actually took us a while to understand. We thought, honestly at the start, we thought it was technology. And I know a few people have fallen into this trap. We thought it was technology. Students are going to love technology. They looked for technology. They wanted it to be on an app. They wanted it to be easy access, etc. But they like Facebook, because there's no one looking at what they're doing and they can write what they like. Whereas here we wanted a specific behaviour, an answer to a specific behaviour, evidence of a specific behaviour. So that jump is what. So they didn't not like PebblePad, they just didn't like what we were asking them to do on PebblePad. So it was difficult from that perspective at the start. Now initially, and we were on V3, we've just changed over in the last week or so to V5, they did find it clunky. Like one of the things there was an issue with was, for example, adding a file. So if I created a workbook and they had to attach a file, there was one way of doing it. If I asked them to create a web folio and attach a file, there was another way of doing it. In a conversation, there was another way of doing it. So it was more complicated than they needed. They were used to, like I say, on Facebook, you literally hit the little peg that attaches and away you go. So they wanted that sort of functionality, which I'm delighted to report. I can go back and tell them I took their feedback on board, which I didn't. And now we have all of this functionality in PebblePad. So having V3 wasn't that bad after all. Yeah. So, is that okay? Yeah.
I was just interested in the self-reflection that they do on whether they'd met a certain competency and then the tutor responded. Is there anything that happens after that? So what sort of happens next?
That's a very good point and question. So for example, if the student says, I did really well, and the tutor writes, no, they didn't get this competency. We didn't think about that really. So what we do, and I suppose it's because we didn't have to rather than anything else. What we do is then the student and the tutor do their piece on placement, and then the academic involved inside will review everything because we have to see if they've all been filled in. So basically we look for what we call red herrings. If there was a mismatch, if the student said one thing and the tutor said another, then we could look at that, but it didn't happen. But I get your point though. We haven't had it, so we didn't deal with it. Yeah. So, but they do have to pass each of those competencies. If they don't get a yes, there has to be, maybe they'd have to do another placement. It hasn't happened, but it's a good question.
We work with a project at Dundee University, and they sort of changed the whole assessment pattern so that the student had to complete a self-reflection on an assignment that they'd completed, and then the tutor would look at that and the conversation sort of continued.
Very good.
I was just wondering if that process that happened, because it's, I suppose,
That's
a
good
way
point.
of narrowing the gap between the tutor's perspective and the
It's very good, yeah. What's expected and what actually happens. It's a very good point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I thought like we do lead the students to self-assess, so they're aware of what they're being assessed on. Was kind of my initial point, but I completely take it. That's a very good point. Yeah, very good. Thank you.